Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about knitting the um, heel flap, working the heel flap on our sock. And before I start, I just want to show you where we're at on our sock. So I've knit the leg to the length that I want. Looks pretty narrow, but see, it stretches. So it will, somebody's foot will fit inside there nicely. And here I am at the beginning of my round. These are my heel stitches here and my instep stitches up here. So in order for me to get, well, first let me talk about what we're doing with working the heel flap. So this section of the sock is going to be the part that covers the back of the heel. And before I start working it, I need to get myself over to the edge because I'm going to be knitting across all these stitches flat back and forth. And you can transfer these stitches, work them onto one single needle. Just later in the sock you'll have to divide them up into by half again like we have them here now. Or you could do the lazy thing and work across the two needles, which is what I typically do. So I am on a plain row. I've got this pattern stitch going on here, and so I've worked my last pattern row. So this would be a plain row, and I'm just going to go ahead and work across my first needle here in pattern, which happens to be knit 4, purl 4 ribbing. And then after this last row, I'm going to switch patterns, and we're going to be doing the heel stitch pattern. Not sure, yeah, I did. Which is just a slip stitch and purl 2. Okay, so now I'm going to turn around. So instead of jumping onto this needle and working across that needle, I'm just going to turn around so that the back side or the inside of the sock is facing me. Grab my needle, and now I'm ready to work the first setup row, which is to work across. And in this case, because I'm no longer going to be working, I'm not going to work this pattern down the bottom of the heel. I'm going to work a different pattern. So I'm just going to purl across all of these stitches, with the exception of this first stitch. When we're working the heel flap, we always slip the very first stitch of every row as if to purl with the yarn in front. And this is going to create a chain selvage along each edge. So I'm going to go in as if to purl and slide that stitch off without working it, and then purl across the remaining stitches. All loosey-goosey. And so I'm no longer working in my ribbing pattern. I am just purling across. And then when I get to the second needle, I am just going to go ahead and purl across those stitches. So here at this point you have a choice. You can continue working off of this needle onto this needle, so you'll end up with a single needle, all the stitches on one needle, or you can just go ahead and work across this second needle and leave all the stitches on the setup as they are on 3 needles, which is what I'm going to do, because I don't want to go through the anguish of having to reposition stitches later. That's my my lazy woman's excuse. I'm avoiding future suffering. It's really no big deal. So if you find that you want to work back and forth on a single needle, that's fine. And some people prefer that because when we get to the part where we're going to be turning the heel, it's easier to see the first time what's going on with the heel turning if you're on a single needle. I still work across that process with all the stitches situated on their respective needles regardless. Okay, I'm almost to the end of the and okay, now I'm going to turn around and I am going to work the first row of my heel stitch pattern. I decided I was going to do the Eye of Partridge. Which is a variation of the slip stitch heel, and they both start out the same way. Again, we're always, the first stitch is always slipped as if to purl with the yarn in front. I brought my yarn forward, so I'm taking that first stitch as if to purl and slipping it off, and then the yarn goes to the back because my first stitch is going to be knit, and then from here on out I'm going to slip as if to knit, knit the stitch, slip the stitch, knit the stitch, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit. And then when I get to the center here, this stitch was knit, so the first stitch on this needle will get slipped as if to knit, and then knit, slip, knit, and so forth. You can talk to yourself as you do this because we have a tendency to want to knit those stitches. We don't want, I mean, you could lose track of where you're at. So it's okay to say knit, slip, knit, and so forth. Slip. Oh, see, and I have a problem because I should end up with the knit here, so I got off somewhere. Let me back up and see. It should be knit, slip, knit, and it should be a knit on the end. We can't end with the slip stitch. So let me back up and see where I something went wrong. There, something went wrong here. I had two knits together. So let me just make sure. I'm going to look slip, knit, 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 slip, and knit. Now I'm happy. And then I'll turn around, and the reverse, the backside row on Eye of Partridge and the slip stitch rule is the same. Slip stitch heel is the same. Slip the first stitch as if to purl and purl across all rows. Okay, so I am going to continue working on my heel, and I will come back, heel flap that is, and I will come back after a little while, after I've gotten all of my rows worked, and come back and and talk about turning the heel. So bear with me for just a minute, and I will be back shortly. Okay, I am back, and now what I'm going to do is to talk about turning the heel. But before I do that, I want to comment on a couple of things, clarify a couple of things. Earlier when I was having you slip your stitches, I told you to slip the first stitch as if to purl with the yarn in front every time. This actually will create a chain salvage on one side and a salvage with a pearl bead on the other side. So let me show you what those look like. See these little pearl beads? So one side will look smooth like this, and the other side will have these pearl beads like this. This is knitter's choice, and I actually that was observed during class, and I it didn't trigger in my mind to explain what was going on, that these are two different salvage edges. So in order to get the salvage, the same chain salvage on either side, what you have to do is on the purl side, slip the first stitch with the yarn in front as if to purl, and on the other side, slip the first stitch as if to purl, but with the yarn in back, as if it was going to knit, but you would go in as if to purl with the yarn in back. Okay, that will give you this chain salvage on both sides. The salvage with the pearl beads is not a bad salvage, and some people prefer that, and it makes it actually rather easy to pick up your stitches because you pick up the pearl beads later. And in order to achieve the pearl bead salvage on both sides would be, you would slip on the purl side, slip the first stitch as if to purl with the yarn in back, and on the knit side, the front side, slip the first stitch as if to purl with the yarn in front. And those are the two different salvage edges. I'm sure there will be questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, so I finished my Eye of Partridge heel, and earlier I said that it gave a lattice effect, but it's more of a quilted effect, really. That's what it looks like. So now I'm ready to turn the heel. If you're on a single needle, all your stitches will be on one needle. Mine are still on two, as you can see. So what we're doing when we're turning the heel, in effect, is we are isolating, put it this way, we are isolating the center stitches, which we're going to work taller than the sides. And in order to achieve that, we work a series of short rows. So what we do is we isolate the center stitches that we're going to work from the outside stitches that we are not going to work. And in order to avoid a big, huge gap between the center stitches that we are working, we will be picking up these held off stitches one by one as we work each short row. And I will describe what's happening as I turn the heel here. So let me show you what I have. Now I have 32 stitches across here. So for my heel turn, what I'm going to do is I originally cast on 64, so actually I need to purl across 18 stitches. So I will do that. I'm going to still slip my first stitch as if to purl. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And then now what I'm going to do is purl 2 stitches together, purl 1 more stitch. So I've got 4 stitches past the center. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so then now I'm going to turn around. And I'm going to work across the center stitches. So in my case, my center stitches are going to be 5. So I'm going to slip 1 stitch. I'm going to slip the first stitch and then I'm going to work 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And then I'm going to do my knit 2 together, knit 1. So let me get that needle out of the way. Slip 1, knit 1, 2, 3. So it's slip the first stitch and then knit 5. 1, 2, 3. That stitch out of the way. 4 and 5. Then knit 2 together and knit 1. And there are some significant gaps that are left. Let me turn. So there's big huge gap where I turned before, and here's another gap that I'm creating right now. If you're working on a single needle, this it's actually a little easier to turn the heel on a single needle, but I am okay, so I'm going to slip my first stitch, and now it's going to be fairly easy to work or to tell where I'm at in my short rows. So I'm going to work across my stitches. I'm just going to purl across. Let me transfer to a single needle so it'll be easier for you guys to see instead of having all of those needles all over the place. Okay, so I'm going to work across to the stitch before the gap, and it's going to be pretty obvious when I get to it. There it is. See this big huge gap right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to purl the stitch before the gap together with the stitch directly after the gap. 2 together. Actually, before I do that, let me back something up here. I should have the same number of stitches on either side. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Okay, to either side of the gap. So now let me back up again to purl to the stitch before the gap and the stitch directly after together, and then purl 1 more, and then turn around. And slip my first stitch, work across to the stitch right before the gap, So that first bit was just setting yourself up for this. After you've got your gaps in place, you're just not going, I'm going to do knit 2. You could do slip, slip, knit, but I like to do knit 2 together. Knit 2 together, and then knit 1, turn around. So after you've got your gaps positioned in the correct place, you just do the same thing over and over again. Slip the first stitch, knit or work across, in this case I'm purling, work across to the stitch before the gap, purl that stitch together with the stitch right after the gap, and then work 1 stitch more, turn around and do the same thing again. And you keep repeating that until you have no more stitches to work. Turn around. Slip the first one. I'm slipping as if to purl, by the way, on those first stitches. Oh, speaking of slipping as if to purl, when I was talking about slipping the stitches in the body of the heel flap, I said in class, slip as if to knit. You can also slip as if to purl. It's knitter's choice. If you slip as if to knit, we will get a tighter, denser fabric because the stitches are getting twisted. If you slip as if to purl, you'll get a more flexible fabric. So it's knitter's choice. You can do it either way. I prefer, actually, you know, I have no preference. I'm rather inconsistent. Sometimes I do as if to purl, and other times I do as if to knit. My challenge is to make sure that I duplicate on the second sock what I did on the first sock. Okay, so here I am, and I'm going now, continuing on, and as you can see, each time I get to the gap, purl 2 together, and 1 more after that, and each time I do that, I have fewer stitches held off to the side. So now I'm down to just 2, 4, 5 stitches. And those held stitches actually represent the number of rows that you're going to be working. So I had 11 stitches held off aside from the center. That means that I am working 11 short rows. I'm going to turn, continue on. And here I am at the stitch before the gap, stitch after the gap. I'm going to work those together, my preferred work 2 together method, and then one more, and then turn around. And we'll just continue that way until you have no more stitches at all. Eventually we'll get to the point where you will have you'll just work the last 2 stitches together. And when you read the directions for this, it makes no sense on what is happening, but when you actually do it, it makes sense. So 2 together, and then 1 more. One more, and then turn around. So see here, now I have just 3 remaining, so that means I have 3 more short rows to work. And you can see my heel here. Some patterns have you do wrap and turn at the gap, but I don't do that. And I've never had unsatisfactory result with just the knit 2 together to close the gaps. and 2 together, 1, and turn around. Slip the first one, and then work across to the gap. Then once you realize that what's happening is that you're just isolating those center stitches, and that the center stitches are what are really where the extra rows are getting worked, you can modify how wide or narrow you need that to be. So if you have a narrow heel, you would isolate fewer stitches in the center. If you have a wider heel, you would isolate more stitches in the center to give you a wider section. Okay. Slip and work across. I'm almost done with the heel. This process also goes fairly quickly. I'm a slow knitter, so it's not going as quickly as it would go for some people, but for me, it still feels pretty fast. I mean, by comparison. Across. And I'm not doing a stitch pattern here, although you could incorporate a stitch pattern if you wanted to. But I usually, for this section, just do plain old, here's the gap, and 2 together, plain old stockinette, and then 1 after the gap, and I'll turn around. So here's where I have just a single stitch after the gap on either side. And I know that I'm pretty much finished with the heel turn. And I will put my sock aside until the next class. Oh, yeah, my stitch is wonky. So knit 2 together, and my heel is finished. So now I'm at the point where I'm going to, since I'm on 1 needle here, what we're going to do is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. We're going to take half of these stitches onto another needle. So you'll have 9 stitches, because we're going to pick up our gusset here.